Hello, we've had a slight malfunction here in terms of handing over to control to one another. So bear with us. We're just going to go back to square one. We are now recording. I'm now hopefully going to give Ollie control of my screen again. And Ollie, hopefully you're off.
I hope so too. Let's wait and see. So we've had some great issues of taking back control, which has been very topical and given us a good giggle for the last 20 minutes, but let's move into something a bit more serious and real now. So thank you for joining our webinar. Caroline and Judy, would you like to introduce yourselves before I run through our bits?
Yes, so to kick off, Caroline Noon. I work at Vivid Research, which is a small qual agency, no surprises there. Been on the board of AQR for a few years now and was thrilled to be part of the project kicked off by Ollie actually on listening to clients, which we presented to Aura and then at the MRS.
Hi, I'm Judy. I run a small brand and research consultancy, and in a very similar position to Caroline. I've been on the board for a while, and in fact was on the board many years ago when Wendy Gordon was chairperson, and I really enjoyed working on this project with Caroline and Ollie, and we learnt some really interesting stuff. So hopefully you'll enjoy listening.
Lovely. And I'm Ollie, work for a slightly larger research agency in Ipsos Mori. And this is a project that we started sort of mid to late 2019, which might seem like many moons ago. However, when revisiting this research, it's actually even more relevant now than it ever was before. So we're very pleased to present it to you, the membership, because we'd actually really like your views on what we found. So the project was a series of depth interviews conducted by everyone on the board of the AQR. We went out and interviewed 29 different clients from different industries, from at different levels of seniority, to get their understanding on what they thought about qualitative research and what the future of qualitative research could hold, so that we could try and get hold of this debate and create more relevance for qualitative research, which is obviously what the AQR is here to do. So jumping into the results, we quickly found that there were a series of barriers, if you like, to qualitative research, which are, I do have control. So clients frequently told us that they didn't have enough money to commission qual, didn't have the time. I've already got a lot of data, I don't need qual. I've got a lot of consumer quotes, nice one to hear. I don't have the training to actually commission qualitative research effectively. I don't have the support internally. People trust data more than qual internally, internal stakeholders. And then behavioral economics means I don't believe what people tell me. So these were some of the barriers that we heard, and we pushed into them to try and understand what was really going on there. But I think, you know, from any decent qualitative practitioner, you can look at those barriers and then you can start to try and overcome those barriers. So you can start to say, okay, fine, I can work with these, and please do, because these are genuine stated barriers. But I think from the AQR's perspective, we've tried to look at this sort of on a slightly higher level to say, actually what we've heard is that the value of qualitative research is declining, i.e. what a business thinks they can do with it. And alongside of that, there is a fear, at least, that qualitative research is losing relevance. And those are two things that we wanted to focus on, that we wanted to try and figure out ways of overcoming. So we all became superheroes, and we decided that the AQR was here to the rescue. So we did some work trying to look into a definition. And this was consulted with clients as well. We asked them what they thought. And now we're coming back to you on which definition you would like us to develop. And this is how we ran the MRS presentation at the MRS Impact Conference last year. And we had an audience of 80 plus people there, and we had voting technology, because you can do that when you're face to face in that old world. And so we ran this as a vote, but also we would like you as a membership to try and help us develop some of these ideas. So we are going to pitch 3 ideas to you. Caroline, Judy, and myself are going to pitch these 3 different ideas. The first one being that memory has a predictive quality. So Caroline will take us through why that's important. Judy will tell us that qualitative research is about meaning, not quotes. And then I'll finish up with the idea that qualitative curation is probably the most valuable client-side asset that anyone has at the moment, and that is a qualitative skill set. So without further ado, we will jump into each pitch. Each pitch is 5 minutes long. At the MRS conference, we had a buzzer, so we weren't allowed to go over. I'm sure we'll do the same again. And then we'll wrap up a bit at the end and give you time to discuss it back with us, because really this is about us consulting with you as well. Okay, so over to Caroline.
So our first pitch, my pitch was memory has a predictive quality. I've got a nod or something at Ollie to move the chart. We've all got to do this all the way through. So taking 2 particular points of our barriers that we saw in the listening project, the idea that internal stakeholders trust data more than qual, and behavioural economics means I don't believe people, they're quite critical issues for us all. And I think we've all come across the idea that with big data, with neuroscience, interacting with people seems to be a bit either pre-COVID or last century, whichever way you want to look at it, although lots of online interacting has been going along. But we also found that clients play back to us that their internal stakeholders were looking for something newer, something sexier. And as a career move, it didn't always reflect well on everybody to be commissioning what we might consider classic qual. Even though in terms of classic qual, you know, we involve a raft of techniques beyond interviewing, beyond the poster child of groups, but to ethnography and bringing in sort of the newer techniques of social media scraping and all that sort of thing. So one of the challenges been for our clients at the insight level, selling in qual further up, that it's not that sexy, and some people have even sort of played it back as very system 2. But moving on, but one of the things we want to put forward in this pitch is that we are all system 1 as researchers. We have, the ability to read people is a human skill, and it's part of our toolkit, which we shouldn't forget in talking about qual and selling it in and bigging up the virtues of qual. So the ability to read people, the ability to understand and interpret, to see what they are saying, what they're not saying, what makes them uncomfortable. And we are system 1 individuals across all sorts of methodologies. As I said, you know, ethnography is in our toolkit, semiotics are in our toolkit, observation, workshops, shared experiences. We can come at this in a lot of ways, and we are always interacting as people with empathy. And as we said, the things that we can pick up on, what's not said, what makes us uncomfortable is all the more important. So what we need to do is sort of address this to own the system 1-ness of it all. So moving on, we often have leveled at us that, you know, getting people to remember something is very looking in the rearview mirror, very backward looking. And we've known this for a long time in research. And I think my point is already we're dealing with it. We already know that people don't say what they think and don't do what they say. We've known that for a long time. And we have marshaled a whole load of methodologies that's helped us around that for a long time now. But with, you know, bigger learnings in neuroscience, we have more knowledge around that. And a lot of the things that have emerged around memory being sort of, it's not fixed or static, that it changes and it moves, is stuff we've already dealt with. We already interview people at different times, in different contexts, at different periods of time from an event, of all of these things that impact how people are memorizing things, and we can work with it to understand what's going on. So getting someone to share a memory doesn't make it false. We just have to understand how we're dealing with it and where we're coming at it from. So Ollie, so what that leads us to is a charge that's often been leveled at us, that the charge of post-rationalization in terms of Qual research, some of the Qual research, the interviewing the groups, where we are asking people to recall, to share their memories with us. But is that our enemy? I mean, I've already said, over time, we have had methods to get around it, and we are bringing new methods into Qual all the time with artificial intelligence, social listening, and all the things we bring in, and we're doing much more mixed methodology. But when we come to memory, is it our enemy if people post-rationalize? Because it tells us a lot. It tells us about group belief, culture, values, and the things that will play well to people. So we understand what people want to think they think. We understand how society sees us, how society sees the choices we make. And that's really important. That's not to be undermined. So I think it's really important that we want to big up memory and say, yes, we understand the pitfalls, but we also can work with it. And moving on, and one of the things that, as I said at the beginning, behavioral science means we don't need to talk to people. So the developments in neuroscience in some ways seem to chip away at the foundations of what we do. And yet I contend that actually it props it up at the same time. We had Nick Chater on doing a webinar for the AQR last year. As I've said several times, he's my professor crush, so that was a great thrill for me. And his theory is that we improvise. We have no inner set of values. The book's called The Mind is Flat, but there's no inner set of values. There is no iceberg. We make it up as we go along. Luckily, we can think very quickly. But what we do is when we open our mouths and come out with something, we don't know what's going to come out, but what we do to come out with an opinion is draw on association, on memory, on the cultural values, and understanding that is as close as we're going to get. And he's a great fan of qualitative research and was pleased to do the webinar for that basis. So by understanding the associations we draw on, which are our memories, then we can, in a very real sense, say that memory is predictive, and qualitative research is fundamental to better understanding people and their motivations. So that's my pitch for memory is predictive.
And mine was, and I think you might remember from the beginning when Ollie listed the issues that people push back on qualitative research about. One was, I have enough consumer quotes. I have plenty of consumer quotes. I don't need any more. Now, my argument is that qualitative research is about meaning. It's not just about quotes, and quotes are a component part of what gets us there. So moving on, Ollie, if we remember Groucho Marx saying, quote me as saying I was misquoted. There's quite a lot of that goes on in qualitative research. Years back, I remember being taught to analyze by tearing up quotes on transcripts and putting them into different spaces in a file, and then having a look at those and seeing what they told us. Well, it's the interpretation of those quotes, our understanding of them and our belief about them that's so important. So an anonymous quote here is, a quotation's a handy thing to have about, saving one the trouble of thinking for oneself. Always a laborious business. Only a lazy qualitative researcher will rely entirely on a quotation to tell them what's going on. It's what we do with that that's so important. And I just thought that if we move on, Ollie, one thing that we know we are getting a shed load of is very short, sharp sound bites at the moment. And for the last 10, 15 years, the explosion of social media and the invention particularly of things like Twitter have allowed us to believe that in 140 characters, somebody can express themselves, to sum themselves up on what they think. But a quote will only ever give us a perspective on how someone felt at the time they spouted off, at the time they put that piece of information into their social media. And actually that can often be a really important spontaneous feeling or response, a passion or an off-the-cuff remark that we do need to capture and is a really important part of helping us understand a broader picture. However, although it's insightful, it's very rarely the whole story. And at our best, we are fantastic storytellers. This is an ad that was produced for The Guardian many, many years ago. Only those of you over a certain age listening to this webinar will know this immediately. And I hope you can hear it when we play it. But it shows you the difference between one perspective on something and a number. Ollie is now playing.
An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression. But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on.
I've always really appreciated that ad for being able to shortcut what I think the best qualitative researchers try to teach the people that work with them, and also to help clients to understand, which is those full perspectives mean multi-methodology. Experiences in Qual are often more important than one, and how qualitative research can give you a layer of understanding onto quantitative research, which can also be incredibly invaluable if it's used in tandem with quant. And the other thing that I just wanted to say before handing on is that I can give you an example of where I said something very clearly and determinedly about 14, 15 years ago, when I was concerned about what we were doing to the environment. And I'd read a lot of articles and I'd read a lot of books, and I said, I can't remember to whom, if they invented the electric car, I'd be first in the queue. And it's safe to say I still haven't moved from a petrol car to an electric car. So I don't think we can rely on what people say. What we need to understand is what people mean. And so I rest my case on meaning too. And to sum it up, and this again was something said by a very clever qualitative researcher, which is the job of good qual is getting people together, allowing them to talk and interpreting what they say. That's the gold dust to find the true meaning. And I think this segues nicely into what Ollie's going to talk about.
Thank you, Judy. So my argument is that qualitative curation is the most valuable client-side asset. So let me explain what I mean by this. So if we take the point of view of the client-side researcher, we realize that they are bombarded by information. Then they can very quickly and easily access information from all over the place. If they want to understand about motivations, they can look on Facebook. If they want to bring to life their consumer, they can go and look on Instagram. If they want to know about their product reviews, they can quite easily go and have a look on Amazon. If they want to know what the new trends are amongst what the kids are up to, they just need to download TikTok. If they really want to understand, the new modern online customer journey, Google Analytics is fantastic. And in fact, Google Analytics has actually spawned new methodologies in trying to help clients figure out how people get to their products through consumer journeys. And what we're facing is a moment of infobesity. Clients are bombarded with information, and it is actually making sense of that information that is the difficult part. Interestingly, in SMR's report in 2019 that looks at the proportion of research commissioned by clients, you won't be surprised to see that quantitative research is certainly heavily represented, but there is a new entrant in 2019. So 3% of all research commissioned was deemed to be secondary research, no primary research method as part of it, which takes us to a place where it is not about getting information, it is about curating information. So what the information we have and how do we make meaning out of it? And this is how the client-side role is changing. Remove research agencies and actually just look at what the client-side role is. they are now having to put data together from all sorts of different data sources and try and bring that together in one neat, nice story. Previously, there were fewer qualitative and quantitative methods, and they may well have commissioned those all at once, and an agency or researcher would tie all of those bits together and present it back as one piece. Now all that information comes from different places. The qualitative skill set has never been more important, because that's the skill set that a client needs now. And I would argue that this is a skill set which is around curation. So curation obviously comes from the world of art and museums, and is sort of defined to be the selection, organization, and presentation of content by experts, which is pretty much the same thing that we as researchers need to do. We need to synthesize and interpret people and data to create a story that inspires action. And I think that that is really the qualitative skill set that clients are taking on. And that summarizes our 3 pitches of how we should start to define qualitative research, and which of these definitions should we take forward as the AQR, which one should we promote to the industry, and which of these definitions is going to help qualitative research gain more relevance and more value amongst client-side researchers. And we're not going to do this in a webinar today. This is what we did at the MRS conference. We had over 80 people vote, and actually all 3 of those, in a live vote after the 3 of us pitching it, all 3 of those came out pretty much neck and neck, which goes to show that actually all 3 of these things are important. And it's not really about which one is most important. It's more about why you chose the answer that you chose. And this is a question that we'll come back to in 2 minutes. Because what we want to do is we want to recognize that all of these things are valuable. Qualitative research encompasses the idea that memory does have a predictive quality, and we can rely on what people say. It is purely about meaning rather than quotes. Quotes on their own are, in isolation, don't help us that much unless they have meaning behind them. And actually our skill set is becoming more and more valuable. So I do want to turn it back to you, everyone on the call. Hopefully you've had a minute or 2 to process and think about which of these definitions you like and which ones help you, and which other ones you might think are important. This process has come from listening to clients. And so it's obviously, we need to know what the users and buyers of research are thinking, but equally as the practitioners, we represent you as our membership, and we also want to figure out what the best way is for us as the AQR to start promoting. And we can do this through training, through webinars, through all sorts of different things, but it helps us if we have some direction. So hopefully we've waffled on for a bit. You've been able to collect your thoughts. And we would invite anyone to ask a question or share a thought or comment, because you are all experts in this world.
I think yesterday you may have received a sort of nudge about joining the webinar, and on that nudge it asked you if you could think about the definition of qualitative research, and I wondered whether anybody had come up with something on a piece of paper that they'd like to share with us.
I'm going to stop the sharing, and I can see that Kevin has raised his hand. So I'm going to see whether I can actually take the slides down, take remote control back from Ollie, and do away with this, which may be slightly more difficult. But hey ho. Can you see Kevin's hand as a matter of interest?
No.
Nope. Right.
Hello, Kevin, whoever you are.
Kevin McLean.
Kevin McLean.
Okay. Where are you, Kevin? Let's see whether I can. If you go on chat, Kevin. We've got one from Simon Riley.
Yeah.
if you can see that one.
It's a combo of meaning and curation about cutting through the noise and distilling multiple sources into answers for clients. Absolutely is my response to that. I think you're absolutely right.
Ah, and Graham?
So all three arguments are true, which is what we hoped people would say.
Oh, they're all flying in now.
Okay, Kevin, you're here. But now's your opportunity to give your all. Curation has the biggest value for clients.
You have to promote Qual as being about meaning. It's the added value that Qual offers.
I think Ollie was too kind when he said that they all got voted about equally. I think Ollie had pretty much a win when we were at the MRS, to be honest, and that's being reflected in these comments.
Oh, I also think it's slightly unfair to suggest that this was my pitch as well. We divided these pitches up based on what we heard from clients as well. So I think that this is interesting because it does seem to show that there is this overlap between creating meaning and you know, arguably, if you're a cultural theorist, talk about systems of meaning and how we can actually try and figure out what those systems are, and that's a very good kind of cultural point of view that we would take to it. And it's also about curation, because curation actually does bring in lots of different data points and create an insight to action, which is very, very important. But I would argue with not discounting this idea that memory has a predictive quality, only because this is one of the issues that we've heard from clients. So that's the reason it's in there. To be honest, the idea of meaning having a predictive quality may not have emerged from practitioners, but it certainly has emerged from clients. So I think it's an interesting one for us to take on as well.
I think there's some really interesting stuff coming up here about this. Two things. One, the notion of whether we are either skilled at or in the position where we should be curating, or whether that's something the client should be doing. And also something from somebody, it's gone too far up the list now for me to see it, about whether qualitative research is more human shaped. And I think that's also really interesting, because I asked a semiotician, Rachel Laws, to tell me what she thought the definition of qualitative research was. And she said the experience of being alive as a human is qualitative. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to say. And Audrey, I agree, it is regrettable we still refer to data as being quant, not qual. It's the difference, I guess, between big data and soft data.
Build on some of those, I mean, curation, when we heard back from the clients, I think very strongly in the research, we're talking about curation, which given all the sources of data is important, but interpretation was one of the key pluses of good qual for pretty much everybody I spoke to. And that comes into the same bucket, the same area. It's bringing experience and context and what's the word I'm looking for? Now to bear, which is valued. And I think curation is that sort of thing, is curating ideas, curating different data sources, but that bringing together of ideas is what was very strongly valued. I feel, I don't know about you others, from the work we did.
No, I agree. I think this idea of somebody saying, oh, I quite like this notion of human, or holistic, I think, Kevin, you've written there, which is interesting. And those are really quite important words when we're talking about our world. I remember listening to a guy on Radio 4 talking about everything falling into two shapes, booba and kiki. And anything that's, if you draw booba, you almost draw a sort of soft, squodgy shape. And if you draw kiki, it's like pointy stars. And I've always thought qualitative research is booba, B-U-B-A, and quantitative research is kiki. And there's a role for both of them in life. And that's just interesting.
For the heck of it, would you like to try a poll? I can click the button and just see what happens.
Try a
Try what?
Try a poll.
There's
Oh, a poll. Yes, very good.
Why not? Let's have a moment to vote.
Go for it, guys.
How are you spelling Baba?
Can you vote for more than one, Luella?
No, I didn't do it that way. I did it one. I forgot to
I've
ask.
got feedback that it means all three, so it'd be interesting to see if you have.
Oh, no, there's one coming out way in front.
I saw Kevin post a comment, qualitative equals wholemeal, followed by re-upping interpretation. And for some reason, I went to sourdough post-lockdown. Where else could you go? I mean, are we the new sourdough?
All right, let me know when you want me to end the poll, because it looks as though 92% have voted.
Oh, well, that's good.
That's enough. Okay, so you've got.
So, interestingly, before you announce the results, Luella, interestingly, at the MRS conference, right? So the first debate it had about maybe 10%, but 10 or 15%. But then number 2 and number 3 amongst the MRS membership were pretty neck and neck until the third one actually won out, but not by very much at all, only by a few percent. So amongst the MRS, of which we are a subset, as you will understand from sampling, qualitative curation just about edged ahead of meaning. So Luella, do you want to?
And I was going to add one thing, which is we have 54 participants on this webinar, which is, I don't think, statistically valid.
Yeah.
But I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Thank you for checking our interpretation. Yes.
Okay, so you've got 6% for memory has a predictive quality, 74% for qualitative research is about meaning, not quotes, and 19% for qualitative curation is the most valuable client-side asset.
So of our AQR membership, we prefer the idea of meaning than curation, with by some clear margin, which is
interestingly, in order to apply meaning to anything you read, see, hear, listen to, observe, you have to take into account memory, and you have to take into account the fact you're curating whatever you see. So I guess the answer is it is all three.
Okay, taking it down. There you go. And I do apologise for not introducing these guys. I got my knickers in a twist at the beginning with sharing. So this is a project that's been a while in the making. We suddenly realised that we hadn't shared it with the membership, hence the reason for the webinar. And it's also up for Best Presentation Award from the long distant MRS Impact Conference in March. And the winner will be announced this week. So congrats for having got this far. Anyway, back to you guys. Would you like to take it any further?
Well, it looks as though Ollie's got a job training people in curation, according to these comments. And that's interesting. So we are actually, as a board, trying to help really clearly define qualitative research in a way that everybody would be comfortable with, which probably stretches beyond these three elemental meanings. And we're working on that at the moment by canvassing views of people like you, and also canvassing views of other people outside of this webinar. And we will be trying to put something together that we can present back to everybody in due course. So look out for that.
So I have an observation that I would probably put out there, and I think it's that qualitative researchers aren't necessarily wonderful at selling themselves. Is something I've seen, some certainly better than others, but not all the same. And I think that this idea of curation, which I don't entirely stand behind for the sake of a pitch, I certainly do, and this for the sake of representing what I've heard from clients, I certainly do. But I think the idea of curation is mildly woolly, and it's not as clear cut. And therefore, potentially, as a researcher, we feel a bit uncomfortable saying we're doing something when it's not so clear and measurable attached to it. So I think that if we've heard it from clients, it is important. I think if we've heard it from clients and it's made it this far, it's got some legs attached to it. So I think maybe our next step is to follow Simon's advice and maybe offer some training from the AQR on what good curation is and looks like, and then it can become something that is slightly more solid within our skill set and we feel a bit more comfortable talking about and doing. So this is one great thing that we can take away from this webinar, in that we can start to figure out, I would describe it as woolly, but Liz has described it as wobbly, which I think is also quite good as well. Which is one good thing. So we should be taking your ideas away for training purposes. Is there anything else you would like us to think about in terms of training based on what you've heard today and what we think clients are after? Maybe the comments take a few minutes to catch up. Yes.
What?
A nice comment.
We can do
he's asking us to do a plug for this.
our AGM is coming up on, is it the 29th or
30th.
30th? It's a virtual one. You need to register for it. It's going to be a fun one. There's never going to have been an AGM like it. So please sign up and come. It's a true celebration of the 40th anniversary of AQR. So come all.
No, it says it will be amazing. So on the basis that it's going to be amazing, I think everybody should come along to that. That sounds really great. Kevin, more training on non-traditional methods, and he put the not me. So we can certainly think about that, and we do our best in our training across the year to make sure that we are looking at things which are less traditional, give us a bit more scope for play, which is important.
I also like a comment that Graham Booth has put out there, that we need to tackle the idea that behavioural science invalidates qualitative research. It doesn't invalidate qualitative research, but I think that potentially suggests that we need to own it as an idea a bit more and be a bit more concrete about how we are really going about that. So that is potentially another one to think about in terms of training, if people are interested in that. So from Debbie as well, how to integrate more behavioural frameworks to design analysis, like COM-B and other ones like that. So yes, let's take on and potentially start to own behavioural science a little bit better as well.
We're also going to be looking out for some help in terms of illustrating whatever we come up with as definition. So if there are any budding designers amongst you lot who could help out, that would be really helpful. And keep an eye out on AQR's website for new events that are coming up, because there are a hell of a lot in the run up to Christmas. Any more for any more?
There's an enormous amount of richness actually in some of the stuff that's coming up on this message thread, and I have no idea whether we can capture this, can we, Luella?
We can.
Because if we've got it, I think we can work our way through it and potentially respond to the webinar attendees with our thoughts on it, because I think it'd be really interesting.
Yep, no, I'll keep it and pass it on. But if that's it, I think you've gone to 12:40, which is probably long enough for everybody who's been looking at it. And apologies for the panic first off. So bye-bye one and all. Thank you very much. And I'm glad we got there in the end.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.